Joining me now to discuss this in the studio is former Health Minister in Yemen, Najeeb Ghanem, who is now a Member of Parliament for the Islah party. And from London, we are joined by Bhanu Bhatnagar, who is a spokesman for the humanitarian agency Save the Children. Bhanu, we're going to start with you first of all, and we're going to talk humanitarian aid. So much of the aid that has been sent to Yemen just isn't getting through. Why?
Well, I mean, Yemen has become the world's biggest humanitarian disaster, kind of a stain on the world's conscience, because it's entirely man-made. And you just mentioned the access issues. That goes back approximately a year to when the Saudi-led coalition put in force a blockade of the main port in Yemen, in Hodeidah. Now, Hodeidah is very important because it's the point at which 80% of most of the goods that come into Yemen go through. And so the whole country relies on food and fuel that comes through Hodeidah. So the month-long blockade of Hodeidah last year has led to a knock-on effect, which we're basically seeing the effects of even now. And that's leading to a whole host of problems, from disease and hunger to malnutrition.
Najeeb, you've got a slightly different take on why the humanitarian aid isn't reaching the people who need it. What's your take on this issue?
To a large extent, I not, my view incompatible with what your guest said. There is no a real blockade for the food coming via this Hodeidah shipport. And there is so many shipports are still open under the control of the legitimate power, and also under the supervision of the late coalition led by Saudis.
So if these ports are still open, why isn't the aid getting through?
So many shipports are still open, including Hodeidah. Even the passage of the food coming from Hodeidah, till now, is still open. There is a blockade for the military weapons, which is really under the highly restricted, observation by the legitimate and also power, also by the Saudis as well. So this is the blockade for the military, not the food. The problem is some of this food has been really stolen by the militias of Houthis, and unfortunately they used to sell it back in the black market to feed their machinery, war machinery. In continuous way. So this is one of the main issue, one of the main problem. The problem is some of these reports coming from inside Yemen, mainly from Sana'a. Biased reports used to be misled the international community by this, between two brackets, blockade of the passage of food from. Also, there is another, routes, which is now working very, very, very actively, which is via Salalah shipport. So Salalah shipport in Oman working very actively in these days, Aden shipport working, and also Makalla shipport working, including Hodeidah.
You're a current Member of Parliament. The government in Yemen is supported by the Saudi-led coalition. And as you say, Saudi has been providing humanitarian aid to Yemen, but there can be no doubt that the airstrikes and some of the attacks carried out by the Saudi-led coalition have been devastating and have exacerbated this humanitarian crisis. How do you respond to that?
Yeah, it may have some part, but not that main part. Yeah, it may have some. I can admit, no problem. There are so many mistakes in the airstrikes and attacking civilian people, including children and women. Yeah, we can't ignore these things. As also member of the parliaments, we always in contact with our partners and always, raise all these issues, which is really very painful to us. We would like to avoid all this. We would like really to stop the war, but really the problem is why we can't stop the war is the coup itself. So when we would like to stop the war, we have to stop the reason of this war. The reason of this war started by the coup by Houthis and also by the Iran influence in our country. Mm-hmm. So this is the problem,
Bhanu, I'm going to bring you back into the discussion here. Why do you think that largely the international community has turned a blind eye to this current situation in Yemen?
I'll get to that in a second. If I may, I'd just like to respond to some of the doctor's points there about alternative routes, because there's a number of things that need to be looked at. First of all, there aren't that many other routes. The doctor's suggesting Salalah in another country. It's very, very far away, the land route, to send commercial and humanitarian aid through Salalah in Oman and then to transport it overland. And remember, we know that there are elements of ISIS and Al-Qaeda in the far east of Yemen, and for aid to go through those areas. Then we have the other port in Aden, which is not nearly able to handle the large amounts of aid that Hodeidah port is able to handle. And Aden port is already at full capacity. And once again, any aid that goes through Aden also has to go via land routes to some of the most deprived people in the north of the country.
What do you say to Dr. Najeeb's assertion that the Houthi rebels are actually stealing this aid? Is that something you've seen?
We haven't, look, we believe that all parties in this conflict are causing this catastrophe. And so while we absolutely believe that, you know, the Houthis are you know, breaking international humanitarian law, so are the Saudis. But we also know that the Saudis have killed far more civilians and children over the past 3 years than the Houthis have. Now, the point is, we would like to see all parties in this conflict to stop fighting and to come to the negotiating table in good faith.
Okay, well then let me ask you now, Najeeb, we had the latest round of peace talks in September collapse. Do you believe that both parties will come to the negotiating table, and is that the only way we'll see an end to this conflict?
Yeah, we were about to reach a mutual conception and mutual agreement about what is going on and what we are going to make to stop this war. And we were about to sign it. And even in Kuwait, our delegation, the legitimate, you know, government delegation, already signed, you know, points, which is, you know, a draft of the agreement. And the Houthis were about to sign it. But Iran intervention came because there is some Iranian advisor they were there in. And they use even in Geneva, also in Kuwait, and they told them that, no, don't sign it. See, once the Iran put their hands out of Yemen, and the Houthis have their own, you know, rights and free to negotiate, I think we can sit together.
So you don't believe that there can be a resolution until Iran doesn't have a hand in it? Could the same be said for the Saudi-led coalition?
Absolutely. Really, to be honest, really, Saudis and Emirates are pushing us to reach a mutual agreement with the Houthis in favor of our national interest. But the problem is the Iran, and they used to. What's the main cause of those interventions? They would like to transfer the, the coup, intervention into a legitimate power to be accepted by Yemenis, by the regional, powers, and also by the international community. So this is the main issue which we will not accept it. If they want to be a ruler, they have to go to the election ballot, and they will transfer into fair and free election in a peaceful manner and condition, and we will accept no problem. Whatever they will choose come, nobody will opposite this thing. But with tanks, with force, nobody will accept in Yemen. And this is the real problem, that they would like to transfer this coup power into legitimate power in Yemen.
Bhanu, I can see you shaking your head there. You seem to disagree with some of those points. What would you like to add?
No, I mean, I agree with some of the things the doctor is saying, but he speaks about elections in the ballot box. But the fact remains, there is an active war going on in Yemen right now, and approximately 130 children are dying every single day. And so, we can talk all we want about the ballot box, but the fighting has to stop in order for us to get to a point where we could have an election and have a legitimate vote. And for that to happen, like I said before, all parties need to come to the table. I mean, our teams work on the ground in Yemen, and we are hearing desperate stories every single day. Just yesterday, I spoke to a Yemeni mother who was forced to sell her home just to feed her 5 children. And so she was facing this impossible choice, homelessness or hunger. and she chose homelessness, and now she's living on in a tent on the street. And you know, we need to see an end to the humanitarian catastrophe before we start to, you know, think about what happens in the long term.
Bhanu Bhatnagar, a very important point you make. Thank you so much for joining us, a spokesperson for Save the Children, and Dr. Najeeb Ghanem, former Health Minister and Member of Parliament in Yemen. Thank you both, gentlemen, for being here on Straight Talk.